Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm Roy, your host. We are the show that brings you a wide variety of guests that talks about a bunch of diverse topics, trying to help our small, medium, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and even large businesses. Give them something to think about, maybe something new, or at least help them solve some problems that they may be having, which leads us to our guest today. It's such a timely topic that I'm glad I ran across Brian. Brian Gill is the CEO of Gillware, which they are a data recovery service, and then he's also a cybersecurity expert. And Brian, first off, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Roy, you're the man. Thanks for having me.
Man, I tell you what, this cybersecurity, and a lot of times, I'm just going to say, even us smaller guys, we think that's really not for us, or we don't really have a need for that. But I think nowadays with ransomware and all this stuff going around, I think we probably have as much need as some of the big guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the amount of bad guys is growing with the market opportunity, which
Right.
is big, many billions of dollars big.
Right.
And, every month, American businesses specifically, but also some consumers, but, American businesses are paying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of ransoms every month.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And it's been even stranger around here. It's, and I'm in the North Texas area, that we have had a lot of governmental and school agencies that have done that too. I mean, it's just like they've locked their system up for weeks on end.
Yeah, I mean, municipalities are big targets, and it's tough. Like here, I live in Wisconsin, and if you're, the mayor of a small town in northern Wisconsin, you don't have a IT defense budget. You just don't have it.
Exactly.
But do you have, the property tax records of all of the people of, the 1,800 people in your town, and their social security numbers and their credit and their, a lot of that really sensitive information. You do. And they're a target, and they're a target with a lot of valuable data and very little helping them to defend themselves. So they're a beautiful target.
Yeah, and I've even heard of the some of the bad guys. There's a way to do the bait and switch where they get your property put in their name, then go take loans on it. I mean, I think that just reinforces that anybody that's got a computer that is connected to the outside world in some way, even if you're just a home user, you still need to take some precautions in order.
You're 100% right. I mean, so sometimes they're going to encrypt all your data and hold it hostage. And you could say, well, I don't really have anything I'd pay for. Forget it. But here's the problem. What Roy just said is true. They're going to look for alternative mechanisms to monetize on your, to your detriment. And they will. We've had people hack into their stuff, get their tax records, and they'll file taxes on your behalf.
Exactly.
And they'll file it with like a $4,500 refund, and they're gonna send a change of address to USPS the day before they do that, and that check's gonna go to a PO box in Miami.
Exactly.
True story.
Yeah.
They'll do whatever they can do with whatever information they have. And again, if you're an organization that has sensitive data, even if you're like, man, I've backed everything up, I'm good. Well, you might not be as good as you think, but what can happen is they'll say, well, Roy, if you don't pay us, we're going to put it all up on the dark web, up on the deep web.
Right.
So even if you're not going to pay us for it, somebody else will.
Yes. Yeah.
And they'll hold you like ransom, kind of inverted.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
And we hear that term a lot. If you don't mind, just explain to the users exactly what that dark web concept is, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, to really dumb it all the way down, I'm going to get a little tiny bit technical, but I'll try to keep it so we don't start falling asleep. Right. But, when we go to google.com, that's going to go to something called a DNS server. The DNS server is going to say, oh, you are going to go to this IP address, and it's a bunch of numbers, and that's how that traffic's going to flow. And the dark web is not on DNS. There's special browsers that you use. One's called Tor. And frankly, a lot of this technology is not evil by nature. I run a Tor browser. It's a great privacy. It's like an internet browser like any other, but it's a privacy browser.
Right. Yeah.
But they don't, it's not a system where the government can shut it down easily.
Yeah.
Because there's no central point of failure like DNS providers,
right,
where the government can come in and say, hey, google.com is now banned, and they just remove it from DNS and then nobody can get there.
Right.
It's kind of like DNS by groupthink.
Yeah.
It's a little different. But what happened, and again, a lot of the dark web and deep web is not evil. Probably 99% of it is just like the normal internet. But, 1% of it's some pretty bad stuff. You can, little marketplaces to buy drugs and buy illegal, narcotics and weaponry and, and obviously sell people's information and child crime photographs and all kinds of really bad stuff is out there too.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to mention next. Is I think it's I don't want to say it's relatively small, but it's like, if one guy has your information, maybe he's limited. But I think the other component of this dark web is it's able to spread your information, and they sell it. Sometimes it's like, I work on it for a while. If I can't do anything malicious, then I can send it off to somebody else, and all of a sudden, what little piece of information they have on you has been spread all over the world. And now instead of one guy trying to get to you, there may be 1,000 people trying to get to you.
Yeah, and they sell them as what they call kits, KIT. And like a full kit is basically, Roy's name, social security number, where his banks are, what his driver's license ID is, maybe a picture of his driver's license. Yeah. When they have that full-blown kit, maybe because they got it from like a small municipality in Texas, right, they'll sell that kit for a lot less than you might think. Yep. They might sell a kit for $10.
Yeah.
But the guy that buys it is going to look to do something, and about as like, you kind of almost have to hope all he does is like register a credit card in your name, like, right, exactly, and cause you a little bit of identity theft and a little bit of pain.
Yeah,
like that's about the best thing that can happen to you when one of these guys buys a kit.
Yeah,
and it can get a whole lot worse.
Yeah, and I want to get you to tell us, let's just kind of, we'll start at the beginning, thinking about that smaller business out there, some things that they can do. One thing I just want to mention is our webcams have become a vulnerability, and luckily, mine's got the little cap where I can shut it. Yeah, we can shut them when we're not using them. But some of the older computers, that web camera is just always exposing your background. So the other thing, I may sound a little freakish, I'm sure, but I got on my older computer, I got like a piece of tape and some paper across that, just where I can control when it's viewing the me and the world behind. So just another little tidbit.
Mark Zuckerberg has one. So if Mark Zuckerberg's covering up his camera, like,
right, exactly.
He's the Facebook guy.
Yeah, right. Well, let's go ahead, and if you don't mind, let's wherever you want to take this conversation. I mean, it's so vast, we could talk for hours and hours, but let's just give some actionable items there and talk about some vulnerabilities that you have seen, in the small business, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, professionals. We all have data that. We all have, our customers' data. We have to think about that. It's not only what I've got on my computer about me, but I've got sensitive information about my clients on my computer as well.
Yeah. So if you're in the world of B2B, you're selling business to business, you can quickly go out of business when you get hacked. If your larger business customers are annoyed with you for letting their data go to the wind.
Right.
It's about the quickest way to lose accounts and to get fired.
Right.
And if you're the type of business where you got one big client, and they terminate you, I mean, it could be out of business for you.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of really good reasons. And oh, by the way, what's happening now when you are bidding on some of those large enterprise accounts, there is an emerging trend where they are more and more security conscious with their vendors. So they're going to start asking questions like, how do you protect my stuff?
Right.
And if you don't have good answers, well, your competitor is going to win that account and you're going to lose.
Okay.
So even if you don't, there's a lot of reasons to try to tie your stuff down.
Right.
Save yourself a lot of pain. So let's just talk about a few of them.
Okay.
Number one, easy thing, man. If your business is big enough to have insurance, you have an insurance policy, call up your broker and make sure you have a cyber insurance policy. Just because you're paying $1,000 a month for business insurance does not mean you have a cyber insurance policy. In fact, you probably don't. And you need one. The average amount of cryptocurrency or US dollars worth of cryptocurrency that we see on a network penetration and ransomware event is about a couple $100,000.
Okay.
So these bad guys are not screwing around. They're not going to send you a ransom note for $2,000. Add 2 zeros to that.
Yeah.
And that's about what they're asking for these days. So if you don't have a ransomware policy, you might be sunk.
Yeah.
Or a cybersecurity insurance policy, you might be sunk. If you do have one and you have a coverage limit of 10,000, you might as well not have one.
Right.
So if you're big enough to have insurance, add a cyber insurance policy. It's going to increase the cost 10% or whatever. Best money you've ever spent.
Yeah. And let's talk about that. Is there two components to that? There's not only maybe covering the liability of our client, what they may come back on to us, or maybe having to pay some of that ransomware, but also hiring an expert like yourself to kind of undo the link that whatever they got into our system in order to get it cleaned out where they're not still in there.
No, that's right. I mean, when you read these insurance policies, they're complicated, but those are the right questions that you need to ask your broker. Are you going to have, because you're probably going to need some remediation. You're going to need possibly some new computer equipment. You're going to need to hire general IT people to come in, set everything back up again, buy you a new firewall, patch your firewall, figure out how that got in. You're going to need to possibly pay some bad guys. You're going to need to pay maybe a third party to assist you with the facilitation of paying the bad guys, decrypting your data, getting your network back up and running. There's a lot of different costs involved. Yes. The one to be very cognizant of and to understand is what is the ransom limit.
Okay.
Because again, like if you have a cyber insurance policy and it's got a $10,000 ransom limit, you might as well not have it.
Right.
It's a waste of money.
Exactly. Okay, great.
So that's an easy one, right? Now, if your business is a micro business, you're just getting started, solopreneur, no revenue yet, pre-revenue, maybe a little bit of revenue, and you don't even have any insurance, well then, your insurance costs money. So you need to be making some to spend it.
Right.
If you're raising capital, like if you are you're running around trying to raise a couple $100,000 of seed capital to start your business, in your business plan, stick like $5,000 or $10,000 of that money to lock down your IT security. Savvy investors are not going to be turned off by that. They're going to be turned on by that.
Okay.
They're going to say, oh, this guy's smart. Yeah. This gal is smart.
Yeah.
They're going to take 1% of what we give them and spend it on IT security.
Right.
That sounds like a good idea to everybody.
Yeah.
Put it in there, budget for it. I guess the number one way that people get hacked is failures in user authentication, which most of us know as passwords.
Okay.
Passwords suck, and most humans are really terrible at making passwords. They've got 1 or 2 passwords, 1 or 2 twists, or sometimes they put an exclamation point at the end. Now it's unhackable. Most people have very, very bad passwords. They've got 50 places where they go, and they got 2 passwords.
Right.
And it's like the name of the house they grew up on, the name of their dog, and an ampersand. It's just terrible.
Right.
So easy to hack. And there's so many ways the bad guys can get that. And sometimes you're not the victim of the initial attack. Yahoo had like a database of whatever, 200 million plus users. And the bad guys hacked Yahoo and got all of the passwords for everybody on Yahoo.
Right.
And this was a long time ago. But, it's sometimes if you have one password for everything, well, any one of those 50 services can get hacked, and now your password's in the wind.
Right.
For the other 49 services,
that's
including your bank.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, because they'll just, I have limited knowledge, but they have these programs that they can load up your username and password, and then when they find out your bank, your credit card, they'll just auto run through all those until one of them gets a hit that they're in.
Yeah, it's called a dictionary attack, and it's super trivial to set up. So again, what do I do? Well, again, if you can see a video feed, I've got a Yuba Key here. This thing's $40. You can buy it on Amazon. I'm not affiliated with them.
Okay, I'm sorry. What, can you spell that? Yuba?
Yeah, Yuba Key. So it's Yubikey.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of different vendors of similar equipment.
Okay.
But what it does is it replaces all your passwords. It's got it looks like a key. It's got a hole in it for your keychain.
Okay.
It can get plugged into USB on your computer. And when you go to log into stuff, you basically push this physical button. So if somebody hacks into your computer, they've got remote access to it, and they're trying to log in as you to stuff. Well, if you're not sitting there pushing that physical button, it doesn't log you in.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've never even heard of that. So thank you for suggesting
technology's coming.
Yeah.
It talks NFC to my phone, so it doesn't. My iPhone doesn't have a plug for USB, but it syncs right up to my phone.
Okay,
it's fine.
Awesome.
It's a great little product. Gets rid of all your passwords, and actually does passwordless entry for most of the modern websites. So it's not even a normal password type of handshake. It's a whole different security protocol.
Okay.
So again, if you have a crappy bank that doesn't allow for this kind of thing, or if it doesn't allow for two-factor authentication, get a new bank.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
so that's simple.
Is something like that going to be easy for a novice like myself to to order it and get it set up where it'll work pretty seamlessly?
Yeah, it's not complicated.
Okay, great.
Frankly, it's easier than remembering 500 passwords.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and you don't, again, it's a better way to live. 99.9% of people, if they bought one of these $40 doohickeys, they would, dramatically increase their security. So there are some cheap solutions on the way. The other big one is email.
Okay.
Email phishing, and I talk to a lot of people who are very cocky, and they'll say, "Yeah, I get these Nigerian prince emails. I know I'm never gonna get phished."
Right.
And the bad guys, those are out there, and you're not gonna fall for one of those. But there are incredibly sophisticated bad guys out there,
right?
And the level of sophistication will blow most people's minds.
Yeah.
There's probably people out there that could put this conversation through a computer, capture enough about my inflection and the way I talk, use AI, to generate a conversation, call my company, say, "Hey, this is Brian. Can you reset my password to the XYZ system? I'm locked out. I locked myself out." Or, "Hey, can you wire $30,000 over to this other account for this, vehicle we just purchased?" And it sounds like me, and they might even spoof my caller ID. The amount of sophistication is high.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, oh, I'm being too paranoid, like you were saying with the thumb over here with the camera. But reality is that's about the appropriate amount of paranoia these days. There's not a lot of help out there. You got to defend yourself.
Yeah.
And there's a service. If you're a little bit bigger of a business, maybe you got a couple dozen employees, there's a really nice service called Iron Scales that'll plug right into your 365, which is what most people use for email these days. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like when I see a phishing email, I can push a button and flag it as an end user. I see a suspicious email, I can flag it. And if enough people flag that email address across the United States, we get a little bit of groupthink happening.
Okay.
And the iron scales up in the cloud will say, okay, that's a bad guy. And then it'll just poof and disappear from everybody's inboxes.
Yep. Okay.
So again, it's not incredibly expensive. I don't really know. I think it's like $10 a month per user. But if you're a reasonable sized business and especially if you're like a higher end white collar business, like an accounting firm or a law firm,
right,
things like that, this kind of service is a no brainer.
Yeah.
You really need to do it as any kind of business, any kind of micro business, to take a little bit different tack. Yeah. Even just a consumer.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to freeze your credit at all 3 credit bureaus. There's no reason. I've never had anybody convince me that it's a good idea to allow some third party like Equifax, who I never signed up for. I never signed up for Equifax. Did you sign up for Equifax?
No, I have not, for sure.
Did you sign up for TransUnion?
No.
Do you remember signing up? I didn't sign up. No, and nobody does. They've been sitting there gathering all our information, selling it, our most critical information, and they just sell it to whoever wants to buy it.
Right.
And I can think of no good reason to let them do that. Now, it's also, I think, free, because I think they passed a law maybe 3-4 years ago.
Correct.
After Equifax's big hack, when all that data that they gathered about you went to the wind. Yeah. They made it free to freeze it.
Yeah.
So you go to their websites and you freeze them. And yeah, that once a year when you need to buy a car, that once every other year when your wife wants to get the Target credit card, or you want to refi your house. Yes, you need to take about 2 minutes, log in to transunion.com, thaw your credit for 2 weeks. That's the entirety of the pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no reason to let some bad guy who bought a kit off the deep web go buy a car in your name.
Exactly.
Go buy a house in your name.
Yeah.
There's no reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that you can pay for services that do that, but you can also go out and do that for free with just I've done it, and so I can't remember if it's a phone call, maybe even an email or fax, but it's very simple to take care of. And I kind of look at it as 2-factor authentication. If I'm going to go purchase something, then it takes an extra step on my part just to make sure that goes through without just letting everything go through.
Exactly. Yeah. Like what? It's such a bad idea to have me take 2 extra minutes anytime I'm going to do anything that's going to be many thousands of dollars that's basically going to require a credit check.
Exactly.
It's a good way to live.
Yeah. And
you don't need to pay for LifeLock.
Yeah.
Just lock it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you got kids, lock theirs down too.
Yep.
And it's just not, I've never had anybody convince me that it's worth it.
Yeah.
And if somebody does breach your identity, if they do try to go buy stuff in your name with your social security number, it's going to bounce.
Yeah.
Because it's going to say, well, your credit's frozen. They're not going to know the code to log into Equifax to unlock it.
Yeah.
Because they didn't lock it. They just bought a kit.
Right. A couple things to say about email is that, in our busy day, we get a lot from, I get tons from services that I truly use, Amazon, PayPal. If you go up and look at the address that sent it to you, it's always some crazy address that is not even close. But regardless of that, I think for me,
and that's an excellent point, Roy.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is domain spoofing. It's a type of phishing.
Yeah.
Where you get an email from PayPal that, hey, you just paid $37 to X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And you're like, no, I didn't. And you're going to click that link and go log into PayPal. Exactly. And it's going to look like PayPal.
Yeah.
And you're going to type in your username and password. And what did you just do, Roy?
You just gave it all away.
You just gave your PayPal account to some numbnuts.
Right. Yeah. And
who's instantly going to log into the real one and take more than $37.
Right.
This little Yuba Key thing is not fooled by that crap.
That's good. Good.
It knows.
Yeah.
It's
The other thing
wrong.
I was going to suggest is that, what I do is if I get something from my bank, Amazon, I just go to sign into that account. I don't use the links on that email. Again, it takes about 5 more seconds because I have to open up a browser window and type in an address. But I can go into my Amazon account and see that there really was no $37 charge over there. It's somebody, obviously. So I guess my message is just take the extra time. Don't click on any links. Go to the, go to where you usually sign in to check that out. And then the other thing is these phishing emails. The prince that sends me the one all the time, or the long lost relative, from Nigeria. I'm on to those. But the other one I get quite frequently that is more. Oh, sorry about that. That was my email. The one I'm more tempted to click on is from somebody that I don't know that says, "Hey, I have this awesome business opportunity. Please just click on my link and I'll share all this information." And while I don't, it's it can be tempting in business to say, "Oh, that's somebody really wanting to reach out." But my thing is, it would come from a company in my business. It would come from a company email. It would come through LinkedIn. They would tell me, "I'm with so and so company. This is what we're looking for." But it's never that in depth. It's always just a nugget of information trying to get you to click on the link. So those are ones I just want to say, be especially careful for those because they'll get you as well.
Well, and to take with email, we could talk about email for hours. But the last thing I'll say, is sometimes you get an email from me, and it'll say, "Hey, Roy, thanks for having me on the show. Here's a link to my Dropbox where I got that document I wanted to share with you." And the problem is they hacked my email.
Yeah.
So sometimes your email didn't get hacked.
Yeah.
Your friends, your vendors, your suppliers' email got hacked. And you've all probably seen this where, some vendor that you haven't talked to for 3 years sends you some email out of the blue talking about some RFP. You've all probably had it happen.
Right, exactly.
And you're like, well, that's weird. And what invoice? I haven't done business with that guy in 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, his email got hacked. But what if it was, 5 days ago you had this conversation and you're going to be more gullible to click on it.
Right.
So, yeah, this is where services like Iron Scales, modern technology like Yuba Keys, can really help you out of some of these more sophisticated attacks.
Right. Okay. So what's next on our list there after we get through?
Well, and maybe it should have been first, but back up.
Okay.
Everybody needs to back up their damn data. It is 2021 last I checked, and probably half the world's data is not backed up anywhere.
Oh.
It's crazy to me with how phones and how laptops and how OneDrive and how Google Drive and how we have all these automated ways and all these cloud services, and yet half of our stuff is not backed up anywhere.
Right.
And worse, sometimes we think it is. So we think something, I'm paying for that backup service. When's the last time you logged into it?
Yep.
When's the last time you looked at your backup service and said, "Yep, there's all the documents I created yesterday.
Yep.
I'm good."
That's a great point because I had one that had a link break, and I went for about, a month with no uploads. I thought it was just sitting there working in the background, and it wasn't. So that's an awesome point.
Yeah, you got to audit your backups. And again, if you're a larger organization where you got a couple dozen employees and you're paying a managed service provider, you're paying for like a rent an IT guy every month, make sure you ask them the question, when is the last time you did a mock restore of my backups?
Yeah.
Well, I've never done that for you. It's like, well, my IT guy is going to do that for me. So maybe you should do that.
Yeah.
Or maybe I need a new IT guy.
Yeah. Right.
You should pay them money for it. Things cost money. And if you're going to have an IT guy once a quarter, mock restore all your backups, make sure your HR data is there, make sure your architectural designs are there, make sure your show notes and your audio is there. whatever it is that you do and your financials and your HR, it's going to take that guy 4, 6, 8 hours of human time to download all that stuff, spin it all up, go into it and say, yep, I've got Roy's QuickBooks file. Yep, it was updated January 15th. Check, check, check. It's going to take some time. And you don't have them do it every week. Have them do it twice a year, 4 times a year, whatever makes sense for your business. But a backup's not a backup if you don't look at it.
Right.
And make sure, because we see all kinds of problems, whether something stops working, whether we got some scope creep. Maybe you hired 3 or 4 new people and they weren't set up with it. Maybe you switched accounting systems, you switched ERPs, you moved this other thing to the cloud. And that's, I guess, the last thing is with backup, the cloud isn't a backup. When you say, yeah, you know, all my data is up in X, Y, and Z provider, well, that's the primary. What is the backup of that thing?
Right.
And if the answer is, I don't know, isn't that Amazon's problem?
Right.
Isn't that, you know, Bill Gates's problem? And the answer is no, it's not. I mean, Amazon, or not Amazon, but there was a huge, it was Amazon. There was a huge outage on the East Coast just 2 days ago, where like 1/4 of the AWS nodes just kind of went poof.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, I haven't even read what all caused it. But these services are more robust than a server that you would set up in your business, but they're not infinitely robust.
Right.
And if you need to have your data in 2 networks, and you need to test that it's actually there occasionally.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
anyways,
the other
and ultimately you should air gap your backups because the bad guys are super sophisticated. Okay. One of the things that my company Gill does a lot is we deal with situations where a ransomer got on a business's network. Mm-hmm. They encrypted all the primary, wherever it is, up in the cloud, on-prem, but they'll encrypt all the data at the primary level. They'll kill any snapshotting, which I won't bother to explain what that is, but they'll also be on the network long enough to understand where the backup mechanism is. Oh, there's a Veeam server over here pushing data to this little appliance. They will log in and they will kill those backups dead. And one of the things we do is we will try to resurrect the data from some of these killed off backups.
Yeah.
So, you know, back up your data. Ideally, in a perfect world, every once in a while, have an air-gapped backup that's not plugged into the damn internet.
Okay. Yeah, and it's important because this is not only malicious, but I was going to say the other thing we need to see is how fast can we get our hands on that backup because, you know, you could have a fire, you could have flood, water damage, tornado. You know, there's a lot of things besides mischief that can happen to your equipment, and if you go for days, you know, hours, days, weeks without being able to get your hands on the data and being able to restore it to some usable form, you know, it can put people out of business.
Oh yeah, or it'll really annoy their insurance company, you know, and that happens. So we run a data recovery lab, and so we get hired sometimes in corporate situations where, well, the good news is they're a backup, and the bad news is it's been downloading for 2 days and it is 3% complete.
Right.
And this business is going to be down for 60 days. And the insurance company's on the hook to pay $25,000 a day every day they're down. So they'll drag those broken servers into us. We'll fix them because we can do it in 4 or 5 days. Yeah. Save the insurance company a bunch of money. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a weird deal, man. Backups are only there. And again, that is exactly the kind of thing you would learn in a mock restore.
Right.
And exactly the type of question when you talk to your IT staff, like, hey, when's the last time we did a mock restore? Was it complete? And how long did it take?
Yeah, exactly. All right, Brian. Well, we appreciate you coming on and talking about this. What I'm going to try to, I'm going to get off air here and try to talk really hard to getting you to come back to do some small segments for us where we can, you know, break some of these bigger things down and let's do some actionable items. I think that would be great. This is such a sensitive place, and you know, the experts like yourself are few and far between. So, I mean, I'm glad that we were able to connect and get you on this episode for sure. But before we go, you've already mentioned a few things maybe, but what is a tool that you use in your daily life? And it could be professional, personal, just something that adds value to your life.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just take a break from the cybersecurity and get into the more businessy thing,
Okay.
one of the software tools that I use that I really enjoy is the LinkedIn Sales Navigator.
Okay.
So it's kind of like LinkedIn God mode. Costs about $100 a month, maybe a little more. But it lets me, if I'm trying to research a certain piece of storage equipment and I want to find the human that wrote the firmware for that equipment, I can get on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, put in a bunch of weird stuff, and bang, like there's my man. He's in Japan, and he's the guy that wrote the firmware for the XYZ doohickey.
Interesting.
And I could be on a chat with him 2 minutes later, and it did not exist 10 years ago.
Yep.
And that job of finding that resource 10 years ago was to navigate some of these companies with 10, 20, 50,000 employees to try to get somebody to tell me who did it.
Yeah.
And it was almost impossible. So
right.
LinkedIn Sales Navigator, it's awesome.
Okay. Awesome. Well, great. Well, Brian, tell everybody, basically who's your client, how you can help them, and then of course how they can reach out and get a hold of you.
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully you never do
Yeah,
from
right.
from a crash perspective. But if you ever lose data, you find yourself in a data crisis. The remediation company that I run is called Gillware, Gillware, Gillware.com. We've been doing it for about 20 years now. We service over 10,000 clients a year, and we can usually help you out of that jam. If you're a more mid-sized business with maybe 100 plus employees, and you're kind of wondering how tight your own IT is, and you're getting a little bit worried, and you've been reading all this stuff in the paper, and you've seen Jeff Bezos himself got hacked, when you see, if they can hack him, they can hack anybody.
Exactly.
I mean, it's you see all this stuff and you're worried. I also work with and co-founded a company called Tetra Defense, and that is a incident response firm, and they also perform risk management and risk assessments.
Okay.
So they will come in and remediate some of those $1 million+ ransoms and help dig out of those specific messes, but they also will help you with monitoring your network and what tools need to get installed. And they'll put your IT department on an action plan, and they'll put them through the old Midas 31 step inspection, like they really look at everything. And if you haven't figured it out, this stuff's really complicated. There's a lot of it. And the biggest problem with cybersecurity, man, is if you got one hole in your game, you could do almost everything right. It just takes one little problem, and it could cause all kinds of problems. So it's, but if you're a medium to big size company looking for real help with locking down your security, or just maybe feeling good because you find out it is so good, but I don't think that's ever happened. That's over at tetradefense.com.
Okay. Yeah, and the other thing we've talked about previously, and I don't want to open up another can here that we'll have to talk another hour about, but it's not only our computer equipment, our network, things like that, but it can be as simple as walking around and seeing what people leave on their desk. Janitor comes through, finds a jump drive, sees a thing, list of your customers, list of password, or the other thing we talked about too was if you have these really cool office spaces in an urban environment where you've got a lot of traffic on the street and all your monitors are facing, this nice open window where anybody can just stand outside your building and take notes. There's a ton to this, and like you said,
there's physical components to risk assessments, and kind of a funny one that'll make one of the ways when you get paid to hack into people's networks. Like, one of the tricks is just to take a bunch of USB sticks and just leave them around the parking lot. But those USB sticks are programmed to basically hijack the computer and install a bunch of malware and give remote access.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a dirty trick.
Yeah, certainly.
It's a dirty trick. So if you find one of these laying in the parking lot, throw it in the trash.
Yeah, well, 10 minutes ago, I would have been the knucklehead that picked it up and said, I wonder what's on here. So,
do not plug it into your computer. Throw it right in the trash.
Okay, we'll do that. All right, Brian. Well, thanks so much again for coming on. We appreciate all this great advice, and it's been a good conversation. I appreciate it. Y'all can find us, of course, at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. Of course, all the social media networks, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and this will go up live on YouTube once the episode is posted as well. Also, you can find us on all the major podcast platforms. I always want to say iTunes, but they've changed it. It's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. If we're not on one in which you listen to, give me a call. I'd be glad to get us added to that. Also, if you're an expert in a field like Brian, please give us reach out to us. We'd love to get you on an episode, future episode here. Y'all reach out to Brian. This is a serious business. It's just getting worse and worse every day. So let's see how Brian can help us before we get ourselves in a jam. All right. Till next time, y'all take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thank you.